Hello everybody and welcome to Galaxy Nostalgia Radio, the retro show about those of us of the baby boomer generation. If you were born between 1946 and 1964, together we'll share the memories of growing up in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. I'm your host, Mike Bragg, and today I'm away from the studio and doing this show via Zoom link with Thomas Malone, an old friend who is also my first cousin and of course a fellow baby boomer.
Hi, Thomas, and thanks for joining us on the show today. How you doing?
I'm doing good, cousin. How are you?
Doing great, actually. We're on Mobile Link, you and I, so we're hoping for the best as far as our connections. Right before the show, we were talking about in the 50s and 60s, and for that matter, the 70s, we had very few options on ways to enjoy our music. Primarily, they were records, vinyl, they call it nowadays. We'll refer to it during the show as records, and the radio, and that was pretty much about it, phonograph and radio. Now, you're an interesting fellow because you've probably got the largest collection of 45 records that I've heard of in a while. How many do you actually have?
Right about 1,500.
1,500, and those are all 45s, right?
Those are 45s. I've got albums as well, but I don't count those. But the 45s are up to about 1,500 of them.
And you've been collecting for quite a while. Take us back to your first desire to collect 45s. How long ago was that?
Well, it was actually back in the probably late 1960s with my brother and I. We got into really loving to hear music, and so we would go over on Colorado Boulevard there in Pasadena, and we start looking for some of the old records. And that's how him and I began collecting our records.
You and I we grew up in the same neighborhood through junior high school and early years of high school. I remember some of those record stores out in Pasadena.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also one across from Pasadena City College. And now these things are coming back. They're coming back in a big way, the 45 records, the vinyl, the albums. But you have an interesting story to tell. You got quite a few stories that are interesting to tell, but primarily is you bring a lot of music out to the generations who might not normally hear it somewhere, or definitely would not hear it on today's radio or streaming or YouTube. Tell us a little bit about what you do as far as the community event.
Well, where I live in rural Indiana, we're close to like Terre Haute and some of the other towns around, and most all of them have festivals every year, multiple festivals. They have car shows. We have quite a few of them around the area. And so I would do the festivals, I'll do the car shows, and they're rather amazed when I say that I can come with my own equipment, set up, and I'll play records. And they go, records? I said, yes, I'll play records. Instead of, getting people that download the music and things like that. And I find that most people that I talk to, when I bring them out there, they're just amazed that there's still that many records out there and that they can listen to them.
It's so interesting because we say way back in the day or back in our time or whatnot, our time is all the time, but way back when we were kids, preteens, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, teenagers, the venues, the community events and the carnivals and some of the car shows, like you say, back in the 60s and 70s, they actually had a guy such as you that brought the records and actually played them. And we're not talking about high-tech DJ style, 2 turntables, boom boxes. A guy such as yourself who would bring his records, his collection, and play this music for people. And at the time, these records, for the most part, were top 40 records that folks would hear on the radio, in their car, or at home. And you brought that generation of top 40 music and way beyond top 40 music. 1,545 is very impressive. So you've got probably A to Z as far as all the pop music that's available. But I can remember going to a car show or going to an event, a high school carnival, and there would be someone such as yourself that would be playing these records. Now, let me ask you, do you play by request? Do you have a song list, a playlist? How does that work when you're out in a live venue?
I have a spreadsheet of all my records with the dates, the name of the person, the song. And so when people come up to the table, I have a sign up there that says, request. And so they'll come up, they'll write their name on the paper that I have there with their names and the song they want, and if there's any special part of it. And so, of course, with my turntable and speakers, I have a microphone, so I can tell the people that this song is dedicated to so-and-so, this song was their high school song, or things like that.
Here's a really important question here, Thomas, is how does the younger generation respond to this precious music of our past, of American pop history? How do the teenagers, how do the 11-year-olds, the kids that have the streaming earphones and whatnot, and they're coming out to a live event and they're hearing this music, what's the general response from the younger generation?
The ones I get, they're very, very happy with the music. They enjoy it. I think I told you that we did a special here in the little town I'm next to, and I put on a big sign out front that we were going to have a sock hop. And most everybody I talked to said, "What is a sock hop?" Now, for those of us who are old enough, we remember, you take your shoes off and you dance on the floor, the gymnasium floor, and they didn't want it scuffed up, so you did a sock hop. And so when they came, we would have parents, we would have couples, and they would come out and I'd play music for, like, the kids. I said, this is a kid's song. The kids would all get out there and do what they thought was dancing. And then I'd say, okay, now it's time for the adults. And then I'd play like the Platters or something like that, which they would slow dance out there. And so the people, I think the last one I did out there was, we had about 120 people show up. So it wasn't bad.
What is the typical running time of your events? Do you go several hours at a time and make a day of it? How does that work?
I do 2 hours. I can stretch it to 3 if there's a need for it, but usually it's in a 2-hour increment. But if I'm outside and we're doing a car show, they'll say, well, we're going to have the car show from this time to this time. So I just go ahead and meet their time.
A little bit earlier in the show, we talked about the 45s that are now available. It ranges from everywhere from a guy on Facebook Marketplace who's cleaning out his parents' garage and he found a box of LPs, 45s, and they're there for the taking. Come and get them. There's 2 boxes. Come and get them. And then there's the other side where some of these records are now worth thousands of dollars. Can you talk a little about the collectability of the 45s and, for that matter, the albums?
Well, sure. If there's individuals out there that enjoy collecting, as I do, there are 2 of the price guides you can get. One is called Goldmine 45 RPM Records, and that's the 8th edition, which is the new one. And then before that, they actually were putting out record albums. And so there's the Goldmine Record Album 10th edition. So if you get these, they tell you what they're virtually going for, but it's near mint is where it starts. And most people realize that you cannot get a mint copy of some records today that were back in. I've looked in there and I saw one for $20,000. So, and that was the Beatles. I think it was A Hard Day's Night, and there was a special that they did on it. And they said if you have a near mint, it would be worth $20,000. You have mint and near mint, and then you go down to very good plus, then very good, then good plus and good, and then fair to poor. I only, if you're into doing collecting like I like collecting coins, like I collect records, but I do that when I say, okay, if I have this record and it's not in the very best of shape, then I'll find that record somewhere, and then I'll replace it with that, so that I'm always making sure that my records are better than the ones I had before. And so that's why most all of my records are very good plus and above.
Where do you find these? If we were to tell somebody, well, if you're interested in 45s, here's where you can look, other than Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever we talked earlier about thrift stores and whatnot, where have you found these records?
Well, there's quite a few of the antique stores, thrift stores. I don't like getting them out of the thrift stores. There's not that many of them, but antique stores, those do. And when you find a place that has antique stores, what I find amusing is that I was reading a little bit about some of the 45s. Before the 45s became popular again, people would walk into vinyl stores that were cropping up, and they try to give them 45s, and they said, no, we don't want the little ones. We want the albums. Well, now everybody wants the 45s too, because people like myself have a jukebox. And so I switch out my jukebox. I have 100 records, which is 200 songs. And so I can change them out every couple months, something different.
You've got the jukebox experience as well as the collectability. Now, I've seen the jukeboxes. A lot of the 50s diners out here in San Diego have the jukeboxes, either the tabletops or the big Wurlitzers or the other jukeboxes. How difficult are they to find nowadays in operable condition?
Not very difficult. My friend and I, we actually go out and buy them, refurbish them, and sell them.
On a jukebox, these 45s that we go to what we call a malt shop after school sometime. And you'd have the jukebox there, and I think it was 3 for a quarter at one time. I believe it was. Now, a lot of these records have been cycled through jukeboxes, and they come back out in the public, or they're destroyed or whatnot. What are some of the more not more valuable, but more popular 45s that would be in every jukebox that collectors find interesting, that are in demand for people nowadays? Music that probably came from the 50s or 60s. What are really the most sought after music and artists?
Well, I have, let's see, what have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in what we call the picture sleeves. Picture sleeves are the most valuable because it holds the record and the picture of the group. And these 5 I have here are all the Beatles. I Want to Hold Your Hand. I Saw Her Standing There. That's all in one. I Feel Fine. She's a Woman. Now, if you look in the book, if these were mint condition, they're worth about $125 each. In near mint, you take about half that off. And I have a friend of mine who sells these on eBay, and she just had one that I'm holding here in my hand. I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I Saw Her Standing There. She sold that just recently for $116 with $4.50 shipping. So you want the Beatles, you want like the Four Seasons. It's just such a wide variety of different groups you can get, and it's really up to your taste.
The wrapper, or what do you call it, the jacket, that would go with albums as well as the 45s. The jacket itself, having the jacket intact without somebody's little sister scribbling all over it back in 1963, the jacket itself really does add to the value of the record, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things I'm pulling out here on one of my songs, to give you an idea, there was a vinyl shop that opened up in Terre Haute about 2 years ago. And I walked into it, and it was brand new, but they were selling all of the new albums, and they were collecting all the old albums, and they were selling those. And they said, well, we've got some 45s here that somebody donated to us. And so I looked at it, and I said, well, what do you want for them? He said, well, how would $5 each sound? Well, usually that's a little high for a 45. However, they were all Beatles, all from the 1960s in the picture sleeves. So there's no way I'm not going to say, they're in beautiful shape.
I suppose because of, we're talking 50 years ago, 60 years ago, in some cases 70 years ago, a lot of these artists, Thomas, have passed away due to age or whatever. Now, would that add to the value of a record if an artist is no longer with us?
Not really, because there's no way that you're going to have any more music from them. What they did, and that's what's available. I like Roy Orbison, and he had one record that was done posthumously after he died. It was called You Got It. Anything you want, you got it. Got that in my jukebox. But, if you're looking for, like, Roy Orbison, you can make a checklist of what you want to find, what you want to play. And then you can go out there and start looking and see what you can find on that. And to be honest, when my wife, she loves going to the antique stores, and I wasn't really in on that until I got moved back here to Indiana and had far less things to do. And so I went with her once I had the jukebox, and I started finding these records. And so wherever she would go, I'd go with her, and I'd start looking for my records.
Well, so as far as the collectability, us collectors, you and I have talked about things we've collected over the years and still do collect: comic books, coins, of course, records. And first off is something that would enhance or add to your collection, or something that you've really been looking for a while. But then there are other things, I suppose, or I'm not, maybe I shouldn't suppose, but do you get a call from somebody who says, "Hey, I hear you're the DJ. You're the record guy at the event. I got 2 boxes of records. You want to come over and take a look? Tell me what I got," or do you just want to take them? Do you get those kind of calls? Because there's millions and millions of 45s that are still out there, because there were so many pressed over the last 70 years.
Yes, I totally agree with you. That's why we have so many of them. And, there's people out there that will say, when I'm playing these, they go, "Well, you know what? I have some of those, I think, at home, and in a box, and they don't know what they've got." I'll give you an example. My wife and my kids, they were all born in Danville, Illinois, a small little town, little over 25,000 people. It's been that way for years. But one of the guys who was born there was Jerry Van Dyke, him and his brother Dick Van Dyke. And Jerry did a song about a TV program he was doing called My Mother the Car. Okay? So most people around the country wouldn't want that record. But if I go to Danville and I put it up there in a window and say, "This is for sale," I'd probably get a good bid on it.
Is that the theme song that he did, or is that a separate? My Mother the Car, she's her very own. I kind of remember some of the words. Was that Jerry Van Dyke?
Dick and Jerry Van Dyke, as you may recall. He was offered to become the little buddy in Gilligan's Island, but he decided that My Mother the Car would probably be a bigger hit, which is totally wrong.
That one run about, 2-3 seasons?
I don't think it made it 2.
I remember the voice of the mother. I think that was Ann Southern or somebody, but I remember the show quite well. A 1928 Porter. That's my mother, dear.
Yeah, it's a 1929 Porter. She helps me through everything I do, and I'm so glad she's here. I don't think I'd want to hear it all day long on the jukebox, but it's there.
There were probably millions of 45s that were sold because they were fad records, fad 45s. I remember Alan Sherman, the camp song, Camp Granada.
Oh, yeah, I got that.
Purple People Eater. I guess we could go down the list with these fad songs. Sheb Wooley, yeah. But fad songs, 45, specifically 45s, and we're talking more 45s, of course, on this show today than we are the albums, but a lot of those, it ran the gamut of music styles and genres, right? You could get classical songs on a 45, right?
Oh, yeah. You could get anything you wanted on a 45. I have one that you might find interesting. It's the Four Prep. The Four Prep did a kind of a comedy 45 where they made fun of each one of the different groups. And like the Belmont. Why Must I Be a Teenager in Love? And it's called Why Must I Be a Teenager in Jail? Every time I find a hubcap.
So there were spoof songs too. But
oh, yeah, definitely.
A few that come into me. I remember every Halloween, we're going to get the old Halloween songs that come out. Purple People Eater, and then
I was working in the lab.
That's the one. That was how you got the music out to the kids back in the 50s and 60s. Any kid with a record player or who had a neighbor or a friend with a record player, you were the popular person, especially when you had a little box of them. And we'd have record hops, sock hops. You mentioned the sock hop. I remember those very well. Had to kick your shoes off because they were a high school basketball gymnasium. And the boys were on one side of the gym and the girls were on the other side, and the brave ones got to go out and actually dance. Remember those?
Yeah, I do. And
I was not a brave one.
When you look at that, remember that most of them were the teachers that were getting you out there trying to get you to dance. But I'm reminded of some of the songs. Bob Seger did one, which to me is one of my favorites. Just take those old records off the shelf. I sit and listen to them by myself. Today's music ain't got the same soul. I love that old time of rock and roll.
I remember that so well, and it's so true. I mean, that was the music album of our youth, our 45 records, and if we could afford it, an album, but the 45s, they're usually, 99 cents or $1.29 or something. And you'd play that thing till the needle wore off on the phonograph, or you'd run the grooves out of the record. But I remember my first 45, of course, was talking about the Beatles, and it was She Loves You. And my brothers and I probably played that all weekend long, from the day we got it until school started on Monday.
Yeah.
And that was our entertainment. Of course, you had your transistor radio, your stereo FM, but you had your radio, usually transistor radio based, or you had your record player, and that was your entertainment. You didn't have too much else to choose from.
That then was high tech. So.
And the guy with the most records, or the girl with the best record collection, she automatically gained popularity because of her collection.
Well, that's where you wanted to go, afterwards, rather than going somewhere where you didn't have any noise, unless you had a malt shop, like we were talking about, the one there on Highland Boulevard. And, you'd go in there and slap some of the money into the jukebox.
That was some good times, too. I remember that's the place to hang out after school. I think we went to Luther Burbank, and I believe there was a ice cream shop across the street. It was packed with kids from 3 o'clock on through until everybody went home or their parents came and picked them up. But I remember the booming of those jukeboxes, the high bass. And it was so exciting because a kid would put a quarter in there and you'd listen to your favorite songs, and what a way to unwind after a busy day at school.
It's something that, I remember Chuck Berry, up in the morning and off to school.
Oh, yeah.
The teacher is teaching the golden rule. So, we did that. And one thing I did want to say, I did have the privilege of getting to meet and become a friend with Ernest Evans. Ernest Evans, his show name was Chubby Checker. And we were talking, I said, how did you come up with Chubby Checker? He said, because I really liked Fats Domino. And I thought, well, what would be close to it? And I said, well, I'm not fat, but I'm chubby. Then he said, and he likes checkers, and I like, he likes dominoes, and I like checkers. So he said, that's how I came up with Chubby Checker.
A lot of recording artists got their starts with minor label 45s. They'd get some money together. I remember reading a story of Elvis Presley. He put, $100 together and went to see Sam Phillips on record and laid down his first record, and that almost or kind of put him on the map. But that's where a lot of the guys got their starts, a lot of the guys and gals.
Well, the Dan Lears did that on a separate label.
Yeah.
And in the Still of the Night, and it becomes such a big hit that it went ahead and Capitol, I think, took it. That's how they got their name out there after it was basically taking that secondary label and got pushed up to a major label because of that.
I bet you have so many good stories to tell, Thomas. Unfortunately, it's a half-hour show on this time, but we're definitely going to have you back. Well, I got you here. We talked about this a little earlier. I'm going to run some of my Y45s by you. Tell me thumbs up or thumbs down as far as collectability, and then we'll wrap the show up. Is that okay?
Sure, that'd be fine.
I got a Doris Day here called Let It Ring by Columbia Records.
As you know, there's a lot of people out there that like Doris Day music.
Yes.
And so it's up to the person if you want to find it. It's usually you're looking at near mint condition would be $12.
Okay.
Okay, so as you go down, you go from near mint, then you go to very good plus, and then very good. And so you knock off some money as you go down on the amount. So that one's a good one.
So you're talking condition for the most part.
It is. Yeah. It's just like I said with coin collecting, you always want to look for the best condition, which is going to bring you the most amount of money for your coin. So you do that with the records.
Well, I got three, which I consider oddballs. These were three that I got either from a garage sale or some kind of sale, but I think they were free. Now, one is on the Checker label, and it's called the Yo-Yo Walk by Paul Gayten, Gayten. What do you think, Thomas?
Well, I found Paul Gayten in the book when you sent me over the pictures of those, but not that song.
Okay.
And so it tells me in there that there's no way they could have every song, out there. But if it was a somewhat popular song then they would have it in the book. And so I would take it that that was not that popular a song or didn't sell many copies. But at the same time, it's whether you like the song or not.
Yeah, maybe some fillers too, because I just noticed on the other side is one that was a lot more popular by the Tune Weavers called Happy, Happy Birthday Baby.
Yeah, that's a good one.
They probably needed a filler on side B. A lot of the side Bs became very popular too, but we'll go on to the next one. Dee and Die, D-E-E and Die, D-I Dream. A song called Just You.
I went and looked that up in the book, and I don't find a Dee and Die. So I don't know if it was just a one-off or what it was, but I couldn't find their name or that record.
There are songs out there, maybe 200 were pressed, and they ended up in a record shop or in somebody's collection, never to be seen or known again. So I'm starting to get it. Now, how about we'll wrap up with Darwin and the Cupids, a song called Chloe.
Now, I could not find Chloe, and I could not find Darwin, but I did find the Cupids. The Cupids have a number of hits that they had, which I looked on that. I didn't see that name for the song, but I would imagine that if somebody's looking at trying to fill their collection with the Cupids, then that would probably be a good one that I'd sell for at least $5.
So either I've got a fortune sitting in my hand, or I've got some things that I can get rid of at the next garage sale. Okay.
Well, the big one that I found is that they had in an album that was of the Beatles, and it was pressed in pink. And now we're talking about 1964. But they found out that there's only one known, and that's because they believe that somebody who was working at Capitol pressed it himself, and we don't know how many of them got out there, if any, but the one. That's why it's worth $20,000.
Wow, okay, that's something to be on the lookout for. Well, Thomas, we're going to wrap the show up. We're going to definitely have you back on the show. It's always good to talk to you because I learned some things from you, and especially about pop music and little side stories and whatnot. But I'm so glad we were able to talk, even though we're both on mobile line today. I hope the listeners will understand. But please come back and visit us soon, and we'll talk about albums next time.
I'd be happy to.
Thanks, cousin. Bye now.
Bye-bye, cuz.
Remember you heard it, probably that's to it, a long time ago. Now's your chance to relive it with Living Radio. Remember.
We do thank you so much for listening to us. We are available on Facebook. Just type in Galaxy Nostalgia Network or Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. You can also go to our website. We have a monthly article authored by our good friend, Galaxy Good Guy George Halalakos. So you can catch that at Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site, site.com for our website. You can also email us. We love the emails, galaxymoonbeamnightsite@gmail.com. In the meantime, join us as a friend in this community of nostalgia and memories, and let's all look back and enjoy it together. Again, I'm Mike. Thanks again. We'll be talking to you soon on Galaxy Nostalgia Network.
This is the Galaxy Nostalgia Network.